People who had a one-night stand that turned into an actual nightmare. What happened? Story 1. When I was 21, I was working at a bar and met this super cute girl who asked me to come back to her place after my shift. I didn't have a car at the time, but she did, so she hung around until I got off and then drove us to her place. Turns out, she lived a good 20 miles outside of town in this really nice cabin by the lake. Very serene, very romantic, very promising at first. As soon as we walk in, she grabs shot glasses and pours 4 shots of gin. I told her I wasn't much of a gin guy and would prefer just about anything else. She shrugged, said your loss, and slammed all for herself. She couldn't have weighed more than 110 pounds, and those shots hit her hard. Within minutes, she was completely wasted, slurring, stumbling, and very aggressively trying to get things going. To be honest, I was not into it at that point. I helped her to bed, hoping she could just sleep it off. I laid there wide awake next to her for a few hours, eventually dozing off into some very light, very paranoid sleep. Then I woke up and realized she had soiled the bed. I couldn't leave, she was my ride. So I got up, tiptoed out of the room, and just sat in the kitchen, completely rattled, waiting for the sun to come up. That's when things took a turn I hadn't prepared for. Her parents walked in. Apparently, she lived with them. So there I was, a hungover stranger in their kitchen at 7 a.m., looking like I'd just seen a ghost. Her parents, to their credit, were surprisingly cool about it. Her mom even made me a cup of coffee. I was mid-sip, trying to act like this wasn't the weirdest morning of my life, when she finally strolls into the kitchen. She takes one look at me and goes, "Did you soil the bed?" I blacked out from sheer panic. I don't even remember what I said, just a lot of stammering and confused no-s. Her dad looked over at me, clearly trying to rescue us both from the awkwardness, and said, "You want a ride home?" I jumped at the offer. About 15 miles into the drive, he glanced over and said, "I know you didn't do it. Your pants are dry." I just nodded and said, "I swear it wasn't me. I just want to go home." The rest of the ride was dead silent. A few days later, one of the girls I bartended with said, "Hey, I heard you met my sister the other night." Yep, that sister. She clearly didn't find the story as funny as I did, and apparently her sister was still telling people I was the one who wet the bed. I ended up finding a new job not long after that. Technically not a one-night stand, because nothing actually happened, but it definitely deserves an honorable mention. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. My one-night stand turned into a nightmare. I was single and met a woman while hanging out with friends. We hit it off and ended up having a one-night stand. But it didn't take long for me to realize she had a pretty toxic personality, so I said my goodbyes and moved on. A few months later, I was blindsided, served with a 3-day protective order. She claimed I was stalking her and casually dropped in that she was pregnant. The only thing on my side was my phone records, which clearly supported my version of events. But I was representing myself, and at the hearing I said something offhand like, "I wouldn't even care if there was a protective order because I don't want to be around her anyway." Somehow, the judge latched onto that line and used it to justify granting the order. After our son was born, things only got worse. She started throwing wild accusations around in court. I wanted to avoid more drama, so I agreed to what her and her lawyer proposed. 1 hour, bi-weekly visits supervised by her family, mandatory drug tests, paid for by me and results submitted directly to her, and $3,500 toward her legal fees. I tried to brush it off and keep showing up for my son, even if it was only an hour every other week. But eventually, she cut off visits altogether. She became so aggressive and unpredictable that keeping any contact with her felt impossible. At the time, I told myself she seemed stable enough, working, caring for our son, and I didn't feel like I was abandoning him. I just felt like I couldn't survive dealing with her. Then a year later, CPS showed up. With my son. Turns out, she wasn't stable at all. She was unraveling, accusing random people in grocery stores of abusing her for brushing past, telling our son that his daycare provider was essaying him, or that I had beaten her while she was pregnant. Within the first week of him living with me, he asked me, "Why did you hit mommy when she was pregnant with me?" That hit hard. It's been 4 years now. I still have full custody, but I'm still battling her in court. She continues to lie and manipulate the system, and somehow, the courts keep giving her the benefit of the doubt. They've hired 5 different supervised visitation providers for her, and all 5 have quit because they couldn't handle her. The court even ordered a psych evaluation before the CPS hearing, and she couldn't complete it, with 13 different doctors. Right now, we're scheduled for another hearing to recommend more supervisors. Again. And if that wasn't enough, she makes around $140,000 a year. I make $70,000, and she hasn't paid a single penny of child support since my son came to live with me. The court sat on my child support motion for 3 years before throwing it out because it should have been a petition, not a motion. So, I filed a petition. That got thrown out too, because she didn't show up, and when the court rescheduled to give her another chance, both of us missed the new date. Now I'm in the process of filing it all over again. All this from a one-night stand. Story 3. I'll skip the graphic details and just walk you through the greatest hits of one of the weirdest nights of my life. It started like most bad ideas do, on Tinder. We matched, and from there, things got spicy fast. For a few weeks, we were basically professional texters. Wild stuff. Things I honestly haven't even typed again since. There was chemistry, no doubt about it. Eventually, we decided to meet up. She invited me out for drinks at a bar downtown. When I walked in, she looked me up and down, gave a nod like I passed some unspoken vibe check, and then immediately ordered 5 shots for herself. Downed them all like water. No food. No pause. Just vibes and vodka. We headed back to her place. She lived in one of those fancy, exclusive apartment buildings. The kind with valet parking, concierge, and probably a secret society meeting in the basement. I thought, okay, she's doing well for herself. Then the front door opened. The place was absolute chaos. Boxes stacked like towers. Clothes everywhere. You know that show Hoarders? That. Just with better lighting and a view of the skyline. But hey, we were already too far into the story to back out. So, we did the things we'd been texting about. Some of it fun, some of it weird, all of it educational. At some point mid-activity, I had one of those internal, "What are you doing with your life?" moments, and I haven't done anything like that since. Now here's where it went from weird to full-on crazy. When I tried to leave, she blocked the door. Full physical presence. Wouldn't let me go. No argument, no drama, just firm refusal. I stayed calm, told her we could go back to the bedroom and chill for a bit more. She agreed. As soon as her back was turned, I bolted. Front door, hallway, elevator. Sprinted like I was escaping the room from Stephen King's 1408. And I swear on everything, I could hear her howling and screaming behind me. Like I'd just broken a curse, and the demon was now free to roam the halls. I finally make it to my car, ready to floor it out of there, and find a boot on my wheel. Because of course. 2 hours sitting in that overpriced parking garage, reflecting on my life choices while waiting for some guy with a wrench to set me free. It was a terrible night, but in its own horrifying, absurd way kind of fun. Wouldn't do it again though. Story 4. I went to dinner with a guy who picked me up, but when we got there, he didn't order anything, saying he wasn't hungry. He told me to get whatever I wanted, so I ordered an appetizer. As we chatted, he started making advances. He was really attractive, so when he suggested going back to his place, I agreed. We got to his place, had some pretty mediocre bang, and I went home. He seemed a bit strange, and I wasn't interested, so I thought that was that. The next day, he messaged me asking if we could meet up again. I politely declined, saying I had a good time but didn't feel a strong connection, and wished him good luck. He kept texting, insisting I should give him another chance. Finally, I blocked his number. A few weeks later, I came home to find a note taped to my door in my controlled access apartment building. He had picked me up from the front entrance before, and I had never told him my apartment number. The note demanded that I reimburse him for the $4.99 appetizer I had ordered. I rolled my eyes, thought what a creep, and tossed the note. About a week later, there was furious pounding on my front door. I peeked through the peephole and saw it was him, banging on the door. I didn't open it, but I called security and had him removed from the premises. I was a bit shaken but managed to move past it. The next day, I went out to my car to head to work, only to find that he had keyed my car, front, sides, and back, causing about $1,400 worth of damage. He had even stolen my windshield wipers for some reason. I called the police, and they contacted him. He tried to claim that he paid me for the night, referring to the appetizer, and that I owed him $4.99. I filed a restraining order against him, Story 5. I met this girl at a friend's place, and we started texting a bit after that. A while later, during a business trip, we hooked up. The next morning, we grabbed a coffee and chatted briefly before I headed back home, about a 3-hour bullet train ride away. Over the next few days, her messages started flooding in. She said she wanted to visit me, but I wasn't interested, so I told her I was busy. I never actually told her where I live or work, so that part was easy to manage. Then, out of the blue, a female acquaintance messaged me saying someone was bombarding her with weird DMs on Instagram. Apparently, there was a random photo of me in her reel from some event, and the girl I'd hooked up with somehow found it. I have no idea how she even made that connection. I told my acquaintance to just ignore the messages. After that, I messaged the girl and told her to stop bothering other people. That did not go over well. She completely flipped out. I just left it on read. I did have an Instagram account, but it was private, and I was always careful not to leave any public photos of myself online. Guess that didn't matter in the end. The next day, my acquaintance calls me. Turns out the girl had somehow found her work number and actually called her at the office. To make it worse, her boss mentioned they'd been getting anonymous calls criticizing her job performance. I made the mistake of texting the girl, telling her that what she was doing was seriously out of line and needed to stop. She did not appreciate being called crazy. My acquaintance ended up smoothing things over with her company. I apologized to her for the situation and then went back to ignoring the girl completely. A few days later, one of my assistants at work contacts me. Someone's been trying to reach me. As it turns out, the girl had pieced together where I work from some vague details I mentioned when we had coffee. She must have done some digging, calling up companies in my industry and from my country until she found the right one. After that, I asked HR to stop forwarding any calls unless they were from verified contacts. Then, it escalated even more. My siblings started getting messages from her on Facebook. Only the ones who were connected to me there, but still, they ended up blocking her too. A few days later, I spotted her standing near the metro exit closest to my apartment. I ask what she's doing there, and she casually says she was just walking around. After that, I start taking long, indirect routes to and from home. I'm pretty sure she followed me from work, tracking me through the metro. That's when I decided to go to the police. At that point, I was constantly glancing over my shoulder, half expecting her to come at me with a knife. The police contacted her and warned her that stalking is a criminal offense. About a week later, I got a furious call from her sister, saying the girl had OD'd and was in the hospital. Suddenly, I'm the villain in the story. I go back to ignoring everything. I still live in the same massive city, but I've since moved, changed my number, and deleted all social media. I kept all her messages backed up on a USB drive, just in case anything ever happened to me. Story 6. A few years back, during a rough patch emotionally while I was studying, I matched with a guy on Tinder who was staying at a nearby hotel. We exchanged just a few messages before he said, "Come over." I knew exactly what the deal was, and I went. No illusions, no expectations. Just what it was. Things escalated pretty quickly once I got there. After our clothes were off, he grabbed mine, tossed them outside the hotel room door, and locked it. Then he told me if I wanted them back, I'd have to earn them, unless I preferred taking the risk of going out into the hallway bare to retrieve them myself. After some back and forth, me trying to reason with him, telling him I wasn't okay with what he was doing, I gave up. I thought, screw this, and got up, planning to grab my clothes from the hallway, get dressed quickly, and leave. But before I could, he grabbed me, threw me onto the bed, and did it with me anyway. It was rough, painful, and completely unwanted. I ended up with a fractured rib. Afterwards, he rolled over and went to sleep while I just lay there, frozen, waiting for the sun to come up. Once it was light, I found my clothes, thankfully still in the hallway, got dressed, went to a pharmacy for emergency contraception, and just sat on the street for a while. I don't really remember getting home. Honestly, I don't remember much of that entire week. I eventually went to the doctor about my rib and was told it was fractured. I also had injuries to my downtown area, but I didn't mention those. My self-worth was so low at the time that I didn't report it. I thought it was my fault. I had said yes to going there, hadn't I? Weeks later, when I finally began to feel a little more like myself again, I opened Tinder just to see. He had already blocked me. I didn't know his last name, couldn't tell you the date, or even what room number it was. There was no way to find him, even if I wanted. Story 7. Back in 2004, I was following a band with a pretty massive fan base. A few hundred of us were active on their forum, and we decided to rent out an entire hotel the night before one of their shows. People traveled from all over, myself included. I drove about 14 hours to get there. By the time I arrived, the party was already in full swing. The hotel was packed, and everyone was drinking and hanging out. I cracked open a huge bottle of Captain Morgan and started going hard right away. Eventually, I wandered down to the pool area where a big group was gathered. After a while, I hit it off with a girl there, and not long after we got in the water, things started heating up. She ended up inviting me back to her room. We get to her room and start making out. She suddenly stops and says, "It's been a while, and it's kind of rough down there. Do you want me to shave it?" I agree, and she heads to the shower while I continue sipping my drink. A couple of minutes later, I hear a loud crash, boom, boom. I rush over, worried. She pops up saying, "I'm fine," but then she falls again, boom, boom. At this point, I'm confused and head to the bathroom. She invites me into the shower, where she continues shaving. When she finishes, she asks if I want to shave mine too. I don't see why not, so I start. About halfway through, the rest of her crew shows up. They had been at the pool. Our hotel room ended up crowded with 6 to 8 people. One of the girls busts into the bathroom. "What the hell? What the F are y'all doing? Get out." I was like, "Oh crap. Crazy lady, but alright, I'll head out." I grabbed a towel and went to get my clothes. As soon as I walked in, this guy immediately goes, "Dude, you got pubes all over my damn towel." At that point, there wasn't much I could do. I just dropped the towel, grabbed my clothes, and rushed to the elevator. As I started getting dressed in the elevator, I realized I'd forgotten my wallet, so I had to head back up to their room. I knocked on the door, and she answered, holding my wallet. She was still interested in hanging out, so we decided to head back to my room. When we got there, my room was completely packed with no space to even lay down. We figured we'd try something spontaneous and find a spot near the pool or outside. We went to the front desk, grabbed some extra pillows and blankets, and made our way outside. The pool area was way too bright to make it work, so we wandered around the parking lot looking for a better spot. Eventually, we found the perfect place, set up a little bed, had our fun, and passed out. The next morning, I woke up with a brutal hangover. The fact that I spent some time riding in the back of a U-Haul didn't help. I grabbed my clothes, opened the door, and found myself standing there with the left side of my, well, you get the idea, exposed for everyone in traffic to see. I quickly bolted, ran off, and never saw her again. That was the summer of 2004 in Atlanta. Story 8. A few years ago, I went out to dinner with someone I had met online about 4 to 5 years prior. She had just finalized her divorce from a multimillionaire ex-husband and was looking for a fresh start. Dinner went great, and I ended up spending the night at her place. It felt like we really clicked. The next morning, she was still all over me, playful, affectionate, so I figured the feeling was mutual. I texted her the next day. No reply. I waited a bit, then tried calling, straight to voicemail. A week later, she finally resurfaced. Turns out, the night after we were together, she went out drinking, blacked out, ran a red light, and totaled her brand new Mercedes. She woke up in jail with zero memory of the crash. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. Looking back, that should have been my cue to walk away. But I didn't. She was wild, sexy, and incredibly fun. It clouded my judgment. I'd never dated someone who blacked out regularly, and I wouldn't recommend it. Her mood swings were intense and unpredictable. Eventually, she admitted she had a drinking problem. She also shared that when she married her ex, the deal was he'd buy her a house and let her do whatever she wanted, as long as they were married and lived together. She said she couldn't always avoid sleeping with him, and the only way she could get through it was by drinking herself into oblivion. I told her it sounded like she made a deal with the devil. She didn't disagree. After a couple of chaotic months, I told her it was over. She didn't take it well. A few days later, she showed up at my door drunk, holding 2 first-class tickets to Vegas, wedding rings, and reservations at the honeymoon suite at the Palazzo. I tried to calm her down and gently explain that marriage was not happening. That's when she snapped. She slapped me, then started swinging wildly. I held her back, trying not to escalate things, but she just wouldn't stop. Eventually, I had no choice but to call the police. The officer arrived, I explained everything, and he cuffed her. I told him I didn't want to press charges. I just wanted her to leave. He explained that without pressing charges, there wasn't much he could do. I finally agreed to move forward, and she was taken away. We had no contact after that. A few weeks later, the court case came up. I still had no intention of ruining her life, so after some back and forth, the prosecutor dropped the charges. I thought that was the end of it. 6 months later, I get pulled over for speeding. The officer comes back to my window and says, "You have a warrant for your arrest." I was stunned, completely blindsided. I'd never been in trouble with the law before, but it was real. After I dropped the charges, she filed charges against me. I hired an attorney and asked what happened to the original case, the arrest, the officer's report. He told me you never really know what a judge will allow or find inadmissible in court. In the end, I accepted a 6-month diversion program and had the charges dropped. I learned a tough lesson from all of it. Were the wild nights worth the fallout? Probably not. And if you're reading this, Melanie, yeah, screw you. Story 9. The night after everything, she got drunk and started texting me between 1 and 3 a.m. while I was asleep. She was upset that I had liked another girl's Facebook post, but hadn't liked her new profile picture. When I woke up and read the messages, I responded with something like, "Hey, I'm really sorry if that made you feel bad. I think since we only went on one date, we never really had a conversation about social media expectations like people in a relationship might. I appreciate your honesty, but this is feeling a bit overwhelming. It was nice going out with you." She apologized and said she didn't mean any of it, that she'd been drunk and acting out, and asked me to give her another chance. But literally the next night, she got drunk again and sent another barrage of messages. This time it was about how I must not be attracted to her or care about her, and she was demanding that we stop texting and have a phone call instead. I told her I couldn't talk because I was working a shift at a busy fire department. She didn't care. She accused me of manipulating her and trying to punish her by not calling. Long story short, I ended up blocking her. But she started calling and texting me from fake numbers using one of those spoofing apps. It got so bad I had to change my number altogether. Story 10. About 20 years ago, I met a guy at a beer festival. He was working for one of the vendors, and I was just there enjoying the event. We hit it off, ended up grabbing dinner together, and eventually got a hotel room for the night. In the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by the strangest sound I've ever heard a human make. It honestly sounded like a loon call. I turned to see him having a full-on seizure in the bed next to me. After a few moments, it stopped, but he was completely disoriented and furious. Then, out of nowhere, he cocks his fist back like he's about to hit me. I went from worried to absolutely terrified in an instant. I leapt out of bed, completely bare, and backed toward the door, trying to stay calm while talking to him, gently reminding him who I was and that everything was okay. Slowly, he started to come back to himself. I told him I thought he'd had a seizure and asked if we should call 911. He said no, he just needed a drink. That's when it came out. He was a severe alcoholic. Apparently, he'd been trying to take it easy that night to make a good impression, but the lack of alcohol triggered withdrawal and the seizure. He was only in his early 20s at the time. Poor guy. I still wonder sometimes if he made it. Story 11. It wasn't exactly a nightmare, but I had a one-night stand that was, well, awkward to say the least. I matched with this girl on Tinder in the afternoon, and we decided to meet up later that night for drinks. I don't drink, but I figured I could grab some water, and we could still chat. About 30 minutes into the conversation, she starts holding me and suggests we head out. During our chat, she mentioned she was polyamorous and partnered, but it didn't really click at the time. When we got to her place, I was greeted by her non-binary partner, who was just chilling on the couch. It was already a little awkward. I'm about to sleep with their girlfriend, after all, but it gets worse when she introduces me to them. I awkwardly say hi, and then we head to her room to get things going. We do our thing, and wow, is she loud. I've had some loud partners before, but she's definitely in the top 5. Once we finish, we're leaving the room, and I lock eyes with a guy in the kitchen. It's her other partner, her boyfriend. Of course, she introduces me to him too. At that point, I'm still riding the high of the endorphins, so I'm not too fazed. I probably had "yep, I just slept with your girlfriend" written all over my face. He casually says, "Hey," and I head out. It wasn't until the next morning that I fully realized how strange the whole thing was. Definitely the weirdest one-night stand I've ever had. Story 12. So, back when I lived in this apartment, there was a bar literally right next door. One night, I wander in for a few drinks and end up back at my place with this woman. We hook up a couple of times and crash for the night. In the morning, I figure that's it, a one-night thing. Nope. She sticks around. All day. I'm not rude or anything, so I just kind of go with it. That night, she stays again. We hook up, sleep, repeat. No big deal. But by day 3, my roommate and I are starting to get a little confused. Trying to be polite, I ask her, "Hey, shouldn't you maybe let someone know where you are? Like, wouldn't anyone be worried about you?" She casually replies, "Oh, I did. We're good." Okay. Cool. I guess. 5 nights. 5 nights I serve as a bed and bang fast to this total stranger. Then, out of nowhere, she takes me out to this super nice brunch spot the next afternoon. Classy place, great food. I'm thinking, all right, this is ending on a high note. She pays the bill, gets up, and just leaves. No ride back, no goodbye, nothing. Just gone. Not so much a nightmare, but baffling to say the least. Story 13. I drove 40 minutes to see her, but when I got there, she told me to wait before coming in. Another 40 minutes passed before she was ready. Once we got to her room, I couldn't figure out how to remove her lingerie, and neither could she. I figured that was probably the reason she had me wait. She gave me a blowy for about 10 minutes, then suddenly stopped and crawled up next to me, curling up in my armpit in a fetal position. She kept asking me to call her a good girl. Then, out of nowhere, she stopped everything, grabbed her phone, and started watching old videos of her and her ex. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was just coming down from a high. I asked what kind of high, and she said meth. I awkwardly asked if she wanted me to leave. Definitely sleazy of me, but I was still hoping to continue. She said no, and then tried to bang me with no protection. I told her no, I'd grab a rubber, but she got upset and ran out of the room. She came back, putting on pants, kissed me for a minute, and then stood up. As she moved to the door, I noticed a shotgun leaning against it. That was enough for me. I started getting dressed, told her we could finish another time, and quickly headed for the door. She tried to kiss me again, but I hugged her instead and kissed her neck. I practically ran to my car in nothing but pants, blocked her number, and was relieved she lived in another city. Story 14. I met this woman from work at a company volleyball league, where she turned out to be the HR lead. We got totally destroyed in the game, but decided to grab drinks afterward to celebrate, or more accurately, to drink regardless of the outcome. I'm 29, single, no kids, and she's 35, a mother of 2 with an incredible figure. After a few drinks, I mustered up the courage to hit on her, and we ended up being the last ones at the bar. As we were heading out, she casually asked, "So, am I going to your place or what?" I said, "Sure." Back at my place, we had a nice chat, smoked a blunt, and decided to shower off the volleyball sweat. Then, we ended up getting in bed. It was brief. I'd been working nonstop, we were both drunk, and it was 2 a.m. I had class at 8 a.m., so after just a couple minutes, we both decided it was time to sleep. I rolled off of her, and she curled up on her side, knocked out. I was on my back, processing the day, when suddenly, I felt something crawling on me. I thought it was a centipede, and being in Arizona, I was imagining the worst, agonizing pain from a bite. But no, it turned out to be her. She was spraying her golden juice on me. I jumped out of bed and woke her up. I said, "Yo, we've got a problem. You just soiled my bed." After a few seconds of silence, she just mumbled, "No." Then, without skipping a beat, she rolled back over and passed out again. I was completely stunned. I grabbed a sheet, went into the living room, and passed out on the couch. When I woke up, she was frantically trying to clean up, muttering to herself. She came out to the living room and sat on the couch with me. I looked at her and said, "You're the first girl to ever do it on me." Her face went completely red, and she buried her face in her hands. She apologized profusely, then left. I went back to my room to find my fitted sheet balled up and soaked at the foot of my bed. To this day, I still see the stain on my mattress whenever I strip my bed. Story 15. 2-night stand. The first night went smoothly. She was chill, good company. Months pass, and out of the blue, she hits me up around midnight. She can't host, and she lives 45 minutes away. Says she'll stay the night if I pick her up. I figure, why not? We're about 10 minutes from my place when something changes. Fast. Out of nowhere, she starts acting paranoid, like she suddenly realizes she doesn't really know me, even though we've met before. That first time was at her place. Her mood swings from normal to full-blown panic in less than a mile. She starts freaking out, demanding I let her out of the car. Nearly yelling. I pull into a gas station, and she jumps out immediately. Starts pacing, calling someone, visibly distressed. I try to calm her down, but that just makes it worse. She starts yelling things like, "Why did I do this? I don't even know where I am. Leave me alone." People are starting to stare. She's shouting at me to go, and I can hear her talking to a friend, asking for a ride. It was a safe enough area, so I backed off, even though I didn't want to just leave her like that. But me being there was clearly escalating things. I drove around the block and parked nearby, just to make sure she was okay. 10 minutes later, the cops show up. Someone must have called them. At first, it looks like they're just checking in. She's sitting on the curb, talking. But then I see her start yelling again, flailing her arms. It all ramps up fast. They cuffed her and took her away. I still have no idea what happened, but I'm almost certain she had taken something before I picked her up. Story 16. It wasn't a nightmare at first, but it definitely turned into one. This happened about 6 years ago when I was around 27. A girl reached out to me on Snapchat. I was friends with her brother back in middle school, and she was 2 grades younger than me, so she was about 24 at the time. I didn't really remember her since I'd moved to a different county before middle school ended. We chatted for a couple of days, and she wanted to hang out. She didn't have a car, so I drove about an hour to pick her up. We went to dinner, and then back to my place to play Mortal Kombat. After that, we hooked up, and she was pretty wild. We went until about 2 a.m., and then I drove her home, and we left it at that. Now, before I go further, I should mention that there were no red flags. She was attractive, in good shape, with a full set of straight, white teeth. I didn't notice anything like track marks, and she seemed very clean. Fast forward 2 months later, one of my buddies who knew about the hookup sent me an article from my hometown. Turns out, she had been arrested with around $80,000 worth of meth, was cooking them in her house, and had a bunch of used needles lying around. She ended up with a ton of charges and was sentenced to about 34 years in prison, and this wasn't her first offense. Luckily, I got tested a few days after the hookup and was in the clear, but looking back, I realized how careless I was. It could have turned out a lot worse. Moral of the story? Do a little research before hooking up. Edit. Someone asked about protection. I did wear them, but we had a few breaks throughout the night. I swapped them out immediately, but it was enough to freak me out. Story 17. I'm 19, and I've been intimately active since starting college. Nothing too wild, just some hookups every now and then, always using protection. Over winter break, I decided to visit my grandpa and family in Mexico for 2 weeks. The small town where my grandpa lives is known for partying and drinking, so I figured I'd enjoy myself while I was there. Since a lot of people my age visit their families around the holidays, one-night stands were pretty common. During my 2 weeks there, I had 3 hookups, 2 of which were just casual fun with no strings attached. About 2 days before I left, I met a cute local girl at a bar. The legal drinking age in Mexico is 18. She was about a year younger than me and invited me back to her place since her parents weren't home. I was excited, and even more so when I realized she was way more excited than I was. After we hooked up, she told me she was glad I took her V-card and that she'd decided not to wait until marriage anymore. I was a little surprised since she never mentioned being a virgin, but I wasn't complaining. I just found it interesting that she gave it up to a guy she had just met. After I left Mexico, I started getting a lot of DMs from her on Instagram, saying how much she was going to miss me and that she'd had fun. But then she started insisting that she wanted no strings attached, and I made it clear that I felt the same way. Apparently, that didn't sit well with her because word got around in the town, and people started gossiping about me for taking her V-card and for having premarital relations. Most older Mexicans are pretty religious and against premarital relationships, so it made me look bad in my grandpa's hometown. Honestly, it was pretty annoying. My parents were fine about it. They know I'm safe and responsible. They understand that she made the decision to sleep with me, and I didn't do anything wrong. Now, 6 months later, I'm planning another trip to visit family, but I know I'm going to catch a lot of crap when I get there. Story 18. During my freshman year of college, I went to a party with 3 friends. One of them was busy flirting with this super pale girl wearing the brightest red lipstick imaginable. Not really pulling it off, but he was committed. She eventually introduced me and another friend to her roommate. My other friend instantly started working his charm on the roommate. Me? I wasn't particularly interested. I just thought she had nice jugs, and I was way more focused on drinking. I got hammered and ended up leaving the party alone, but halfway home I got a text from my friend, the one talking to the roommate, saying I should come back to their dorm. In my drunken state, I thought that was a brilliant idea. I showed up and for whatever reason, I was on fire. Had the whole room laughing for like 30 minutes, completely stole the spotlight from my buddy, and somehow ended up hitting it off with the roommate instead. Long story short, I ended up hooking up with her on the top bunk, while my friend was with the pale girl on the bottom one. She kept saying she had to work early at the campus cafeteria, but we kept going, and she kept getting louder. At some point, her alarm went off. Pretty sure I turned it off without realizing, and we both ended up sleeping until noon. She was very late to work. She leaves for work, and I'm left in the dorm room with the pale girl and my friend. We all get up, decide we're starving, and head out for breakfast. As fate would have it, we walk into the cafeteria just in time to witness the big-boobed roommate, my accidental conquest, getting fired. Turns out she was part of a work-study scholarship program, and getting fired meant she lost her funding. We're talking like $15,000 at this private college. Huge deal. She spots us, sits down at our table, and immediately breaks down in tears. I, of course, am still hungover, confused, and trying to figure out how I even ended up hooking up with her in the first place. Definitely not equipped to handle a financial crisis and emotional meltdown before noon. In the end, I somehow derailed her academic life, couldn't remember her name, and my friend, who had been trying to get with her, held a grudge for the rest of our friendship. All in all, not the worst night. The pale girl ended up dating my friend, though things were understandably awkward considering her roommate had to live alone for the rest of the year. Story 19. I've only had one real one-night stand in my life, and it happened about a year after a messy breakup from a 4-year relationship. I'd been seeing this guy on and off, but nothing was really clicking, and to be honest, I was ready to get back out there. One night, I went out with a friend who was dating a guy from England. His group had been sent over to work at a big manufacturer in town. Cheaper than hiring locals, I guess? Anyway, one of his co-workers started flirting with me pretty heavily. Had a charming British accent and a whole lot of compliments, and I thought, why not? I'm young, it's been almost a year, and he knows my friend's boyfriend, so it's all good. We ended up at the hotel where the company had put them up, and things got pretty wild. We hooked up for a couple of hours, intense enough that I ended up with marks on my wrist. I was tipsy, and afterward, while he passed out, I suddenly thought, what the hell did I just do? I'd always been the good girl. And until that point, my ex had been the only person I'd ever slept with. So of course, I thought it'd be a great idea to walk home at 1:30 a.m. in heels, on the busiest street in town. Cars were honking, and random guys were shouting at me from windows. It quickly got creepy. I ended up calling my roommate, who, bless her heart, had to be up for work at 4 a.m., but she still came to pick me up. The worst part? When I got home and took a shower, I realized the rubber had come off inside. The panic I felt in that moment was unreal. This was the mid-90s, so HIV and AIDS were still a major, terrifying concern. Not only had I just had my first one-night stand, but it was with someone from overseas, which made everything feel even riskier. Thankfully, everything turned out fine health-wise. But the story didn't end there. He actually tracked down where I worked, thanks to my friend, and would randomly stop by, trying to convince me to go out with him again. Story 20. I met this super attractive redhead at a bar, where she was hanging out with her parents after they'd helped her move. The three of us started chatting and played some pool together, and before long, she started flirting with me right in front of her parents. They were joking about it, but in a light-hearted, encouraging way. It was awkward, but still kind of fun. But that's just the beginning. Things got a little more physical when we stepped outside for a smoke. It escalated quickly, so I suggested we head to my place, which was just a short stumble away from the bar. To my surprise, there was way less awkwardness than I expected when we told her parents we were heading to my place. Her mom, who had been pretty sober, said she'd be the designated driver and offered a ride if needed later that night, since the redhead hadn't brought her car. Otherwise, she'd be back around 8 a.m. the next morning. I was pretty hammered at that point, so I just shrugged off the weirdness of it all with the thought, well, I guess I have her parents' blessing. We got back to my place, smoked a bowl, cuddled, and started making out. I was shirtless at this point. She wandered around and commented on all the extra rooms, since I was planning on renting them out eventually. Then she took off her pants, and our hands were quickly all over each other. But suddenly, she froze and went completely unresponsive. A lot of thoughts ran through my head. Had something triggered her, being a former SA victim? Or maybe the weed had hit her too hard. Her sudden freeze snapped me out of it, so I grabbed a big comforter, wrapped her up in it, and apologized, saying we might have been moving too fast. I suggested we just take it easy for the night, and I mentioned there was a carnival that weekend. She could meet some of my friends, and we could have some fun getting to know each other. Maybe even lie about how we met. She insisted she still wanted to bang, and tried to kiss me but froze mid-kiss. Like catatonic froze. The alarm bells in my head shut off. I went solidly into provide care mode. She unfroze not long after I disentangled myself from her. She grabbed my area, and upon finding it without a stiffy, started crying hard. Asking if I didn't find her attractive, how no one would ever love her, asking what she did wrong, etc. In the midst of it, I heard he was right. Having a pretty clear picture of a lot of trauma, we had a long talk about intimacy. I reassured her she was beautiful and sexy, and that we would have banged eventually if that's what she really wanted, but only when the time was right. And she shouldn't be putting this much pressure on herself or me, and some basic info about informed, enthusiastic, mutual, explicit and active/ongoing consent. She cried off and on for a while. I stopped her every time she started hating on herself. She asked a bunch of questions about physical relations about me. She was clearly super embarrassed, but I was doing my best to reassure her. I told her in her current state she shouldn't go to her new place alone, but we could call her mom. I could pay for a cab so she could go to her mom and dad's, or she could stay with me. No pressure, and that all of those were okay. She wanted to stay and just cried off and on for a while. It was getting close to 11 p.m. when I heard a loud, frantic knock on my door. There was also some ringing of the doorbell and shouting outside, calling out her name. I went to answer the door, and standing there was a man in his 40s, visibly furious. He started yelling at me, accusing me of getting her drunk and taking advantage of her, making threats in the process. And it wasn't just him. There was an audience gathered outside, her parents, my bartender, who also dealt weed, and a couple of other people, trying to tell him to calm down. There were also some kids, one of them looking about 8 or 9, who resembled the girl I was with. The math wasn't lost on me. The girl was 22, so it clicked that she must have been quite young when she had him. She came down to the door, and a heated argument ensued. She called him a cheater, a PDF file, finally admitting that she understood what everyone had been telling her all along. Meanwhile, the guy was so worked up that he clearly wanted to start a physical confrontation, but her mom had already taken the kids to her car, trying to get them away from the situation. Eventually, her dad and the bar patron managed to drag the man off my porch and told him he'd better leave if he didn't want things to escalate. He finally drove off, tires screeching. Her mom apologized to me before leaving with the rest of the group. It was an intense and uncomfortable situation, but it ended with everyone leaving. I received a long apology text from the girl's mom later, explaining some of the situation in more detail. I also got more background from the bartender. Apparently, this guy had essayed her when she was very young, and she ended up pregnant. The parents got the police involved, and he was sent away, but she became completely fixated on him and wouldn't let go. She even got a job just to put money on his commissary while he was in prison. When she turned 18, she started working full-time to save up for a place of her own, and when he got out, they reconnected. She ended up pregnant again, but lied to her parents about who the father was. Eventually, they found out that she had been seeing him again, and it was clear she was still emotionally attached. She even threatened to run away with him. Her parents tried to stay calm and prevent that from happening, doing everything they could to keep the kids away from him. She insisted on moving out and getting her own place with him, and out of desperation, her parents agreed. But they were looking for a way to separate them. That's when my weed dealer, a family friend who also bartended there, stepped in. She said she knew a guy who might be able to help with the situation. The victim and her boyfriend were already on shaky ground because he had been caught trying to pursue another girl and was facing the possibility of going back to prison. However, she was still leaving their kids alone with him while she worked, which had the parents at their breaking point. They had already tried various legal and illegal methods to get the kids away from. That's when the parents and the weed dealer started positioning me as a revenge option, even though she had never been with another guy. I was supposed to be a therapist, breakup catalyst, and a way for her to get back at him. What she was really upset about wasn't the fact that he had violated parole and was going back to prison. It was that he had cheated on her. So, people around her started playing up the revenge angle to fuel her emotions. The bartender, knowing the situation, was feeding me shots in hopes I would get drunk enough not to notice the awkwardness between me, the girl, and her parents. I didn't realize how many shots I was taking right after work, and it was quickly getting away from me. As soon as we left the bar, they tipped the guy off about where she was and what she was doing. He tried to message her, but she never replied, and eventually, he brought the kids with him in an attempt to publicly shame her, and because he had no one else to watch them. That gave the grandparents the opportunity they were waiting for to get the kids away from him. I did get a follow-up text from her mom apologizing for using me in that situation. She said their daughter had really liked me but needed time to heal and figure things out before jumping into another relationship or making new friends, so she didn't move from one obsession to another. The dad also covered a decent bar tab for me, but I didn't end up going back to the bar or using that favor, and I switched to a different dealer. About 4 years later, after I had moved away, the girl reached out to apologize for everything and for them involving me in their mess. She said she was in a much better place now. We talked for a while, but that was the end of it. Story 21. I'm someone who's emotionally reserved, which I guess is pretty normal. Growing up, I moved around a lot, which meant I lost a lot of friends and was always having to make new ones. Now that I'm in university, I've met a bunch of people, but none of them are really close friends. They're just the people I drink with or work out with. Last night, I was at a party with some of these friends, and I saw this girl. I introduced myself, and it was obvious right away that she was interested in me, and I thought she was pretty attractive too. I asked her to dance, and before long, we were kissing, and eventually, we decided to step outside for some fresh air. Once outside, she invited me back to her dorm, which I agreed to. We couldn't keep our hands off each other on the walk there, kissing over and over again. When we got to her place, we made our way to her bed and spent about 30 minutes getting hot and heavy before she stopped and told me she was on her period. Still, she gave me HJ without me even asking. After that, she turned off the lights, and we ended up just lying there in bed for a few hours, cuddling, talking, and kissing. We shared a lot about our hopes and dreams, our favorite music, and even our family backgrounds. Eventually, we both fell asleep, but about 2 hours later, she woke me up and told me I had to leave because my snoring was keeping her up. I agreed, though reluctantly, and before I left, I asked for her number. Later, I found out her number was fake. It belonged to someone else entirely. I'll never admit it to anyone, but I felt something that night, and it stings knowing she didn't feel the same. Tonight, I'm planning to drink heavily and maybe find someone else to bang, so that I can keep her off my mind, at least for a temporary amount of time. What really hurts, though, is the hickey she left on my neck. Every time I see it in the mirror, it reminds me of her. Story 22. I was having a drink at a bar while on a work trip and ended up chatting with this guy for a few hours. Eventually, he asked if I wanted to come back to his place. I said sure, and he gave me the usual tour: suburban house, standard furniture, kitchen, the whole normal guy setup. Then we got to his bedroom, and it was completely decorated with cheap stuffed animals. The kind you win at carnivals: bears, unicorns, horses, pigs, you name it. He had built shelves around all the walls and arranged them by size, with the tiniest ones on the bottom shelf and the biggest towering at the top. I'm not exaggerating. There must have been at least 1,000 of them. I had to step outside for a cigarette. Thankfully, he didn't smoke, so I had a moment alone to collect my thoughts. The weird part: everything else about him was totally normal. He had a nice house, we had mutual acquaintances in our work fields, and he wasn't married or giving off any red flags. He just genuinely, unapologetically loved stuffed animals. And the more I thought about it, the more I respected it. He clearly didn't care what people thought, and that kind of confidence was weirdly attractive. I hate to admit it, but somewhere in the middle of all those plush toys, I started wondering what it would be like to actually date him. So, I came back inside, and we ended up having pretty decent bang for being sort of drunk and having a one-night stand. We finished up, and I put my head on his shoulder and asked him what he thought about it. Go ahead and take a prize off the bottom shelf, he said. Worst one-night stand. Story 23. I once drove 6.5 hours to meet a girl I'd been talking to on Snapchat. We met through a group chat with mutuals who knew her in real life, so I assumed she was legit. Her responses were always a little off, slow replies, weird phrasing, but she'd sent me pictures, and in those she looked great. When I got to the address she gave me, I texted, "Hey, I'm here." Just as I hit send, someone knocked on my car window. I thought it was some local crackhead, blackened teeth, disheveled, but then she said my name. My stomach dropped. It was her. She got in the car, and it was immediately clear she was not okay. Barely able to speak or stand, looking like she was about to pass out. I took her to a nearby shop to get some water, just trying to keep her conscious. Back at her place, I tried to come up with excuses to leave. It was late, I was tired, but she insisted I come in. I caved. She told me her housemates were all ex-cons, fresh out of prison and a bit mental. So if they said anything to me, I should just ignore it. That didn't make me feel better. We went up to her room. She opened her nightstand, and it was full of Valium and synthetic spice. She rolled one, smoked it, and immediately passed out. I tried to lie next to her and sleep, but I couldn't. She kept spasming in her sleep, twitching and kicking. Around 3 a.m., I decided I needed to get out. I snuck downstairs, but the front door was locked. I went back to the room to find a key. No luck. She lived on the first floor, so I ended up opening her window and climbing out. I jumped, landed in someone's overgrown garden, and just bolted to my car. Didn't even bother with GPS, just started driving. I was panicked, exhausted, and couldn't figure out how to get out of the maze of her estate. I kept looping around her house, rolling past in neutral, so I wouldn't wake her from her spice-induced coma. My car wasn't exactly subtle. Eventually, I made it out and drove the full 6.5 hours home. I stopped at a rest stop to try and sleep, ended up getting a parking ticket for staying too long. Nearly fell asleep at the wheel a few times. Made it home around 11:30 a.m. the next day, running on fumes and regret. A few months later, I heard she passed away. After I saw her, she apparently got clean, met someone she fell in love with, but the relationship fell apart. She ended up with someone who abused her, and eventually, she offed herself. Rest in peace, Elle. As chaotic and surreal as that night was, your story became a chapter in mine. I'll never forget it. Story 24. It was the worst bang I ever had. I've totally lost all desire for one-night stands. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and after a string of bad luck with dating, I found myself slipping back into the habit of seeking one-night stands. Within a week, I matched with a 24-year-old woman. She wasn't exactly my usual type. I tend to go for shorter, athletic women, but that didn't really matter in this context. She was attractive in her own way, tall, pretty face, and yeah, a bit of a belly. Our conversation heated up quickly. We were trading pictures and messages that built up a lot of tension. And while I definitely felt the adrenaline rush that comes with planning to hook up with someone new, a part of me knew I wasn't fully into her, at least not in that can't wait to bang her kind of way. I hate to admit it, but I think I was chasing the thrill more than the actual connection. That realization made me start second-guessing everything. I even considered backing out, trying to come up with excuses. But then the other side of me, the impulsive side, would take the wheel again. It became this weird mental tug-of-war. When she told me she was already stuck in traffic and driving 45 minutes just to get to me, I knew at that point flaking wasn't an option. It didn't feel right to leave her hanging like that. No matter how conflicted I was, I had to see it through. Right on time, she texted that she was outside. Things started off smooth. We waited in her car for my roommate to head out for dinner with his girlfriend. Conversation flowed easily, there was chemistry, and the vibe was playful. At one point, she climbed on me and did her thing, and before long, she gave me the best blowy I'd ever had. But as soon as it ended, all the tension I'd been feeling evaporated. It caught me off guard. My roommate texted to let me know the room was free, so I brought her inside. We started making out, and things got heated again. For a bit, it felt like we were back in sync. But when she left her hoodie on during our session, I found myself getting distracted. The attraction just faded. Then the mental spiral hit. I started overthinking, worrying about the rubber, reminding myself this would probably be the last time we saw each other. Once I was in my head, there was no coming back. I couldn't stay excited. I felt awful. She had driven all that way, and I could tell by her expression that she was disappointed. That was the hardest part, knowing I hadn't lived up to her expectations, or even my own. I walked her to her car and gave her an awkward hug goodbye. The whole thing left me feeling kind of hollow. That night made something really clear to me. I'm a relationship guy. The best bang I've ever had wasn't just about chemistry or physical attraction. It was with women I had a real connection with. The kind where just seeing them change their clothes made me feel lucky. Like, I can't believe I get to be with her. Even when a one-night stand lined up with my type, it never compared. At this point, even good casual bang feels empty. It doesn't stick, and it doesn't mean much to me anymore. I'm writing this as a reminder to myself, because I know in a few weeks that primal urge is probably going to come back. But maybe next time, I'll come back and read this. And remember that chasing something temporary isn't worth wasting someone else's time, or mine. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.